Hi, this is Jordan.
And I'm Bryan, and you're listening to The Quality Varies.
Jordan.
Bryan?
What's up?
How are you?
Just dandy.
I am sitting literally in piles and piles of paperwork. I have been in town for not but 16 hours, and I leave town in 10 hours. So I'm in town once this week.
Wow.
And it is all for this podcast. That might not be true, but part of it is for this show. So I'm glad to be here. What about you, Bryan? Have you sold your bike yet?
No, I not even trying at the moment. Just kind of giving up on that for now.
You know, honesty is honesty.
That's not a word.
Bryan, what do we got going on today?
I think we're being joined by one of our good friends. What's up, Brandon?
Yes.
Hey guys. I didn't know if I could jump into your banter in the beginning because you hadn't introduced me yet and people would be kind of freaked out like who's this third guy on? Oof. So yeah, I just let you guys do your thing for a little bit there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You know, we gotta. It's an awkward thing, but we gotta get through it every time.
Yep, you're a very good guest.
Through the train wreck in the beginning. Yeah.
Oh well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very honored to be joining you guys. This is very exciting for me. This is my first time guesting on a podcast, so I have no idea where this is gonna go.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And we kind of look forward towards the end, talking about some of the work that you're doing with podcasts as well. But Brandon, we met you in Southern Utah as we were all kind of going through our own experiences. But why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of who you are, kind of the big things about your life right now? Why do people care about Brandon Mcdonald?
Oh, geez, that's a loaded question. Yeah, to give a bit of background, I guess, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then pursued a path, my education of becoming an attorney. I eventually became an attorney in Las Vegas and did that for 10 years until my life blew up. And that was what led me to meet both of you. I have my own addiction story, and my addiction led me to get into recovery, and that was when I met you two. After recovery, I decided that being an attorney was not right for me. It was a very stressful profession, and I am just not built to handle conflict well. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to become an attorney because, I've always been the peacemaker in my family, and living in constant conflict was not good for me and led to me getting into an addiction that almost destroyed everything in my life. Once I got out of rehab, I thought, you know what, I need to change my profession. So I ended up approaching the owner of Desert Solace, a recovery center, and asked him what I could do to get into recovery as a profession. And so he invited me to join him in St. George, Utah, and I became the director of operations for the inpatient program, and I also started up the outpatient program for Desert Solace. So kind of dual roles there. Since then, in the past 3 months, I have transitioned into being kind of the director of marketing over Desert Solace. So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's a new career for me, I guess. I don't have a ton of background in marketing other than just marketing my law firm. So I'm exploring this world right now, and it's a new challenge for me to take on. But other than that, I've got a wife and 4 kids, and that keeps me busy on the outside of my career. And other than that, I just bought a dirt bike, so I'm kind of getting into the whole, motorcycling world. Although I don't do street cycling. That's just for crazy people.
We'll get you
there. Dirt biking is about as crazy as I'll get. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That is awesome. And amazing. Dirt bikes are, I just sold Bryan remembers, I just sold my motorcycle to a gal that has only ridden dirt bikes for a while, and she has taken the step to road bikes, and you'll get there.
So you're telling me these are a gateway drug?
Yep.
Absolutely. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Great.
Bryan, would you agree with that sentiment?
Oh yeah, once you dip your toe in anything, it's just it's a progression. It's a slippery slope. You just
Right.
always want more.
I do like to remind people that I had no intention of ever riding a motorcycle or doing anything of the kind until my roommate was just selling his bike and offered to let me just run around with it in a parking lot one day. And then not 4 hours later, I walked downstairs with a check to buy his bike. It goes fast, my man. So does the bike.
So does the
Right.
But you got a lot of stuff going on. Initially, I mean, you and I have talked a lot. And by the way, it's might I just say that it's nice to hear your voice when I'm actually at some level of consciousness. You and I usually talk a little bit earlier in the morning, and we'll just have a quick chat, check in with each other, keep each other in check on our own lives. But we'll probably remember a little bit more about this conversation than I remember about those conversations in the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, your voice sounds much different at this time of the day. You're a little bit more gravelly in the morning when I wake you up.
I don't know why that could be. I don't know what you're talking about. I like my Brandon Mcdonald alarm. It is the most consistent alarm.
Well, it doesn't wake you up every morning though. I've noticed.
Okay. Well, anyways, one of the I either don't remember or we never really dived into much kind of the earlier years. And you said that you were. I just want to dive right into kind of your past and getting into the attorney and going from Salt Lake City to Vegas. I can't remember off the top of my head. Did you have any other kind of substantial jobs during that time, or what was some other work history that happened that whole time that you were trying to become an attorney, or was it just a straight shot full-time school until the attorney world and the world of law?
Yeah, it was pretty much a straight shot. I mean, I did have various odd jobs, just part-time jobs. I worked at a ski resort for a couple of seasons.
That's cool.
Yeah, I got to, I ran their ice rink there. They had like a little village
Wow.
that people would come out and skate on the ice rinks. So that was my job there. I think I played ice hockey in high school. So I think that was like, they thought I was a shoo-in for that job.
Of course.
Yeah, other than that, I worked at UPS for a while, just part-time. And I also worked at a Big O tire store changing tires on cars. So other than that, I never had any real like big boy jobs, that weren't just part-time or work, during the summer. I knew from the age of 8 years old, I had made a decision. And, when we distinguish between decision and choice, in my mind, it was a decision, and I had cut off all other opportunities to go in a different direction. And I told myself I'm going to be a lawyer no matter what. And that's my only choice. And it honestly made it easier for me to make it through my younger years, I think, because I always just knew what my next step was. I was never confronted with, hey, what do I do now with my life? There was never any of that
kind of
question.
dilemma
Yeah, it was just, I knew I was going to be a lawyer. So I knew, my next step was college after high school. And then after that, it was law school after taking the LSAT. And then after law school, it was taking the bar. And then after the bar, it was getting a job at a law firm. So it was just every step was already kind of set out for me. It made it easy on me. And now looking back, I wonder why I let an 8-year-old decide for me what I was going to be doing the rest of my life. I wish I could go back.
8-year-old had the most qualifications, obviously.
Right. I wish I could go back and talk to that 8-year-old and say, hey, you don't have to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life right now. But, oh well. Life takes you the way it takes you, and that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Brandon. I've heard that story before. I've heard that story before.
Yeah.
Just listening to it now, though, it sounded like. I thought, man, that actually sounds kind of nice to just always know exactly where your next step is. So, when you were going down that path, did you feel like safe or like comfortable just always knowing exactly what you were going to do next?
Yeah, I definitely think that there was an element of safety to that. I think I never had to question my choices, and I don't know, it was just kind of easier to do it that way rather than to let, anything else get in the way of what I knew I wanted to do. And I think I listened to your guys' past episode on identity, and I think, being
Thank
a
you, by the
lawyer,
way.
even though I wasn't an attorney, growing up in high school, there was a part of like that identification for me where I identified with, wanting to be an attorney and telling people, hey, I'm going to be a lawyer when I grow up. And there was like that level of prestige or whatever that comes with telling people that, like, oh, he's a smart guy. And, it wasn't really who I was. I recognize that now, but at the time, I identified with wanting to be a lawyer. And so anything that kind of went in the face of that or like risked me not being a lawyer kind of felt scary in a way. So yeah, I guess your answer, that's the answer to your question. It was safer for me to just make that decision when I was younger and stick to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can guess the answer to this next question, but looking back, you said you'd go back and talk to that 8-year-old. Do you think that you could have benefited from like a life-altering experience anywhere along that path that kind of knocked you from that step after step, kind of progression towards becoming a lawyer?
Yeah, I look at it from two different directions. Part of me, in my recovery, it's part of who I am now, not to regret my past. We always talk in the recovery world about not regretting the past nor wishing to shut the door on it. And so I take a look at it as though I was meant to become an attorney. I was meant to have that experience and to learn from that experience. So going back, I do say that I wish I could go back and talk to that 8-year-old. And I think if I had a different mentality at the time, that, yeah, I probably would have chosen something different. When it's scary, honestly, when you make it through, I don't know how many years of schooling, at least, 7 years of post high school schooling. And then you get your first job and you're like, holy cow, this sucks. I hate being a lawyer.
Oh, no.
And you realize, like, what am I doing? I just spent, almost $100,000 on student loans and all that stuff that goes with it to get to where I'm at. And so there's like that sunken cost factor that goes into it. Like, well, I've already spent all this time and effort and money to get where I'm at, and I can't question where I'm at now. I just have to live in misery for the rest of my life. And it,
in your head, there's too much inertia going that direction.
Yeah, it took my life almost blowing up to get me, that life-altering situation to get me to recognize that being a lawyer is not for me. And, I may have put all the time and effort into it, but that, that's in the past. And the past for me now is mainly just, it lives in my head, and I don't let that be an anchor for me anymore. If I decide tomorrow that I'm going to change careers, fine, so be it. If that's where God wants me to go, then that's where he wants me to go. I'll be, packing up my bags and moving on.
Sweet. So, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you decided to completely forsake your law degree and your career as an attorney?
Well, 38 years old was when everything blew up for me. And so, yeah, that was when my wife and I had a discussion about just shutting down. I had my own law firm and I had employees, and that was difficult because I had to have a conversation with my employees about, hey, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I was lucky to have some very supportive employees who loved me and knew what I was going through, and they recognized that, hey, they were okay. They moved on to other jobs and they were more concerned about where I was at in my life. But yeah, 38 was when we finally made the choice to shut things down at the law firm, or, sell it off and then move on to new things. And I haven't regretted it since. There are times when my ego steps in and I still want to, I still recognize like the need to identify as like, well, I was an attorney at one time. If I want people to think that I'm super smart or whatever, I've had a successful career, like I feel like I need to tell them that. And then I step back and I recognize, like, what am I doing? I don't need these people to like, think that I'm smart in order to like me. I don't need that as part of my identity anymore. But identities are hard to shed, as you guys talked about. It's hard to let go of that stuff after living it for 26 years.
Right.
We met the past lawyer kind of version of you, and we never really met the attorney Bryan. Do you feel like there were any big differences as far as like the way you acted or the way that you portrayed yourself?
I think The answer is that it's difficult to separate attorney Brandon from addict Brandon in a way, because
Yeah.
I shed my career and my addiction around, like, at the same time, basically. And so being an attorney was kind of all rolled into that ball of addiction for me. And so, when people talk to me about the changes that they see in me since then, over, this was 3 years ago that I went through this. And when they talk about the changes they see in me, I don't know if I can attribute it to letting go of my job or letting go of my addiction, but I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, the stress that came from my career was definitely weighing me down quite a bit. And, living in addiction while trying to run a law firm is very difficult and creates a ton of additional conflict on top of just, the conflict that comes from being an attorney. So people tell me today that they can see that I'm just more at peace. I'm much more at peace. I'm much more calm. They tell me that I look lighter, and that's not just because I've lost some weight since then. It's they actually
you lost quite a bit of weight.
Yeah, I've lost weight as well, which is another benefit of my recovery routines that I've set in place. But just in general, yeah, I think I don't want to say I'm a different person, because I'm still the same person. I've just shed all the weight that came with this life that I was living that wasn't really me. And part of that was my career, and part of that was my addiction. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I can definitely relate to you on that. And some of when you said somebody has commented that you just look lighter. And I've gotten similar things when I've run into people in the past month that haven't seen me since I was in my addiction. I was just in Spokane the other day, ran into some old friends, and they were making similar comments, and they didn't know about my addiction. But yeah, very kind of similar experiences there of just being able to shed all that off and kind of act just free of all of that burden. You mentioned, I just wanted to, you mentioned kind of making that decision and then going forward with it. But can I ask, the 8-year-old self, what did you see? What did the 8-year-old Brandon see that caused that choice? Do you have family that are in the kind of the law world? Did you see something on TV? What led to that kind of big decision by the small person?
Yeah, so my family is very driven, I guess, as far as education and career is concerned. And so, my dad comes from a family that's mostly doctors. He was an engineer until he retired. And so they're very highly educated, very successful people. My oldest sister, she went to nationals for debate. She was very good at that. And the sister just older than me, she went to Duke Law School. So there was kind of this unsaid rule in the home that if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, then you're a failure. So I kind of took that on myself as an 8-year-old, and
no pressure.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it seemed like there were two choices for me. I could be a doctor or a lawyer, and being a doctor just didn't appeal to me for some reason. I don't know why, but being a lawyer really did. I thought I can argue with people, so that's all it takes to be a good attorney. And so I just followed that path, and I thought, I don't know. One of my qualities is that once I decide something, I really stick to it, and I don't turn away unless there's something major that knocks me off of it. And I don't know if that's, I'm not going to say it's a good quality or a bad quality, but for what that means, it's when I was 8 years old, I just decided I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm not going to let anything turn me off of that path. And so that's what I did.
I can certainly think of times that I would have appreciated that mindset. I'm sure there were times in your life where maybe that was a little bit of an annoyance that, just as far as not being taken off that path. Were there any other paths or doors that, kind of thinking back, may have been open to you? You weren't open to at the time, but may have sounded interesting, kind of looking back at them? Other opportunities?
Yeah, I was always good at coding in high school. Like, computer science was one of my favorite courses, and
yeah,
I went on a mission for my church when I had just gotten out of high school, and so when I got back, I kind of felt like the computer science world had moved so quickly in that time. Like, this was when computers, like personal computers, were advancing super fast, and so
Yeah.
You just dated yourself a little bit by calling it a personal computer too.
Right. Yeah. No, I grew up in that era. I grew up, I got a cell phone when I was 16 years old. I didn't, and it was a brick phone. That's how old I am. So when I got back from my mission and I was going to college and trying to decide what I wanted to do, there was a moment when I entertained the possibility of getting back into computer science, but it just seemed like I had been left behind during those 2 years that I was gone, and I didn't want to spend the time to get caught back up on the computer world. And so I just chose the easier option that was already chosen for me, and that was to, get a degree as fast as I could so I could get to law school. So that's what I did.
Gotcha. I can see that. Man, Brandon as a coder.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
What would the world be like? We'll never know.
What would the world be like?
Who knows? Go back and talk to 8-year-old and make it happen.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe next year I might decide to go back to school and become a coder. I don't know.
Very true. You mentioned, I know for a fact that you have other interests, and based off my conversations with you, you do make an intention to keep your mind open to kind of what's out there. I don't know if there's any of that since you've started recovery that you're open to talking about, as far as different things that you've tried, different experiences that you've kind of allowed yourself to have after stepping into recovery and kind of stepping into this new mindset.
I've dabbled in quite a bit of other stuff. I have had an interest in going back to school to become a therapist, just because I'm very much in that world, and that kind of stuff fascinates me. I don't know, that might not be in my near future, but that's always a possibility for me. But on top of that, I have more of an entrepreneurial spirit, and so since I sold off my law firm, I've explored opening up other businesses. I mean, I opened the Outpatient, which was an entrepreneurial venture for me. That was kind of scary because I never done anything other than my law firm, and that was in a whole different realm. But I've explored. I got very close to pulling the trigger on opening up a dumpster rental franchise here in St. George, and there was just a couple of red flags at the last minute that kept me from doing that. I've also tried to talk Krispy Kreme into bringing a donut shop here, but they're not franchising right now, so unfortunately that was not on the table.
Dude.
But yeah, I'm always open to other business opportunities on the side that I could run while I'm still, doing my work here at Desert Solace, and I'm interested in that kind of stuff. I've gotten more into investing lately, just in some, I don't know, I guess they call it venture cap. I don't want to call myself a venture capitalist because that sounds kind of douchey, but I have been investing in some startup companies lately that have done very well for me. So I like being in that world. I just don't know if that's something that I'm ever going to get into full time. We'll see. So that's kind of a broad description of where I'm at.
Yeah, and it certainly speaks to your state of mind.
Yeah.
When you see things around you.
Well, I do think that there is a certain aspect of the addict mentality that goes into being an entrepreneur. I always say that word weird, but I think there's something to it where you have to be able to handle a lot of risk, and there's always like the highs and lows that come from being in that world. And I honestly, like a lot of the people that I've run into or that I've gotten to know in the recovery world are entrepreneurs, and I think that lifestyle just feeds into addiction quite a bit. So I have to be careful with myself and recognize, am I going into this with the right intention? Am I being conscious and aware of how this will affect my life and my recovery? Because if I'm not careful about that kind of stuff, it can I know it can offset my recovery and, set me back. And to me, my recovery is the most important thing for me in my life right now. And there's another saying in the recovery world. I'm full of these sayings, by the way, so you'll probably hear a lot of these.
I love it.
They always say, anything that you put above your recovery, you will lose. And so, for me, I have to be very clear about what my values are. To me, my family, my marriage, my recovery is the most important thing, and I don't want to lose any of that. So those are my values. If my job or, my career, whatever, starting a new business ever comes before my recovery, then I don't want to put that at risk. I will let it go.
I love that. Bryan, do you have anything?
It got me thinking, hey, Brandon might have money to open up a franchise.
Yeah. I'm always open to opportunities. People come to me and they say, "Hey, are you open to hearing about this opportunity?" I never tell anybody no, and if it works for me,
that sounds like a good characteristic for an entrepreneur to have.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if it works for me, then I'm open to it, and if not, then I get to have clear boundaries and just tell people no, that doesn't work for me.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the point in my life where I will have some semblance of money, and I can have some of these conversations with Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten to know each other quite well, I imagine, and I'm excited for the day that we get to also challenge ourselves on doing something business related.
Yeah,
because I think that would be super fun.
Right. I can think of a few expenses you could cut out, Jordan.
Bryan, I wasn't talking to you, Bryan.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So what?
I don't think Brandon listened to the Dungeons and Dragons episode, and we don't need to bring anything about that episode into this one.
Yeah, no,
I didn't say anything.
I missed the Dungeons and Dragons episodes. I make it a point to listen to the recovery ones, but I've never gotten into Dungeons and Dragons. I've never been in that world, and so I have no idea what you guys would even be talking about, honestly.
You're lost, buddy.
I think it is your solemn duty as a human being that lives close to Brandon to introduce Brandon into the world.
That is quite a task.
Yep.
Maybe we'll just go have a little block party at my brother-in-law's house.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know if I have the time for that, honestly. I just bought a dirt bike, and so I'm going to be spending a lot of my time dirt biking. Dungeons and Dragons might take me away from that. That's my excuse.
In the recovery mindset, I would call that a scarcity mindset. The world is full of abundance, my friend.
My wife would disagree with you.
Okay, well, I may not make that statement so confidently to her as I was with you. So.
Yeah, I don't either.
Brett, you went to Desert Solace as a client. That's where we met you.
Correct.
And then I left as a client, and I went back to my home. Bryan also left. Bryan was actually and I'll have more questions for you about this, but Bryan was our staff member that watched over us,
right?
An adult babysitter.
I was a professional soccer mom.
Yes. And then you turned around and you became Bryan's boss.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yes.
So I'll ask about that later, but I initially, you and I have talked about this, but what impact did you see in your life from turning around and staying in Desert Solace in that different function and kind of staying in that world?
Yeah, it's definitely been helpful for me in my recovery. I mean, it's great to get paid to go to 12-step meetings and to get to hang around people, who want recovery, who want to be there. I'm a huge believer that culture and environment are some of the biggest indicators of how well somebody will do in recovery. I didn't realize it at the time when I was coming to work at Desert Solace, but looking back, I know that a part of this culture and being in this environment almost 24/7 has definitely helped me stay in strong recovery. And I'm now 3 years plus sober from my addiction, and I attribute a large part of that to being where I'm at and being at Desert Solace and just seeing, a lot of people get inspired by seeing somebody who's 3 years or 10 years or 20 years in recovery. I get a lot of inspiration from seeing the guys who are just coming in and who come in with such a spirit of vulnerability and honesty, and they want to come in and do the best they can to let go of this addiction that has hampered them for so long. And that, to me, that's inspiring. I love seeing people, because to me, the first 6 months or the first year of recovery is the hardest thing that I've ever been through. And seeing somebody else just take it on and live in recovery is inspiring to me. And that helps me in my own recovery. So yeah, it's definitely been beneficial for me, and I love what I do. I love being here and getting to serve the guys that come through. It's great. I love it.
Bryan, you were very involved in a similar way, watching people come in off the street metaphorically and make this massive choice. When a lot of times, I certainly know for me, like, I didn't know a life outside of addiction, and so making this choice certainly into the unknown. Is there anything else you would add to that experience that kind of just, or anything you would add to that experience of just watching those initial couple days, couple weeks?
No, I absolutely agree with everything Brandon said. And he said it perfect. Watching guys come in day 1, day 2, day 3, that's like my most favorite time to get to know somebody, even though it's the hardest time to get to know somebody because they're still kind of coming down off of the the lust drugs that they've been swimming in for years or their whole life in some cases. And this sounds kind of callous, but my favorite was seeing someone come in just absolutely heartbroken, and like at any moment they could just crumble and just be crushed under the weight of their own sins, with like the faintest glimmer of hope in their eyes just from stepping into the building or stepping into this program was my favorite part of that job. Because you can see it when somebody comes in like that. It's just fun to watch them go through those critical moments of recovery where that shifts and they start to step into their own power and just realize how much power there is in recovery. It's amazing.
I agree with that. Just to jump in, it's the best time to meet those guys, but it's also sometimes the worst time as well, because I can almost tell. I'd sit down with the guys. Every one of the guys that came through, I would sit down with them and go over kind of the ground rules that we live by, or the boundaries that we live by in Desert Solace. And I can almost tell. I don't want to say that I could predict their future, but depending on how broken they were when they got in to see us, I could almost tell how well they were going to do, because the guys that came in the most broken, I have a theory that you have to have some kind of an ego-destroying event happen in your life for you to really take on recovery. And whether you destroy your ego yourself or something does it for you, either way, your ego has to go in order for you to stay in strong recovery. And there are some guys who come in and they just think, I know what to do. Just give me a checklist of things that I need to do to overcome my addiction, and I'll be on my way. I don't need a sponsor. I don't need to go through the 12 steps. I don't need to listen to these people or to listen to things that I already know. And that mentality of like, I know what I'm doing and I don't need anybody to tell me what to do, that destroys people's recovery. But the guys that come in that are like just already destroyed, their ego is out the door, they left it before they came in, those are the guys that just do really well in recovery. I love seeing that.
Mm-hmm. So based off of that, Bryan, I'm curious both first me, and then maybe Brandon, if you by chance remember anything about when we came in, because you were staff at that time. Mm-hmm. Do you remember anything about those times?
Yeah. Yeah, so every guy's low is different. That level of... Sorry, I just punched my desk.
Aggressive over here.
Yeah,
you're getting into it. Yeah, I like it.
Every guy's low point or rock bottom is different, right? And that level of brokenness can look different a lot of times. There were guys that came in with like literal hunched shoulders and like poor posture. But like Brandon, I remember Brandon always carried himself physically upright and like proud, not prideful, but like proud. But there was definitely that energy of like a spiritual sickness that he was definitely like very aware of. And like you like looking at you with eyeballs, you just see like a guy, right? But like looking at you with an open heart, or like kind of with your spiritual eyes. I remember Brandon being very like broken inside. Like you could just see it, right? And same with you, Jordan. Like the first staff meeting we had after you came in. me, me and Sweet Lynn, we just kind of shook our heads like we didn't know what to do with you. Like there was nothing inside you. Like she even called you just a blob, and so I don't know if you remember, but that's what I called you from then on out. You're just this
which I was super grateful
blob
for.
of a person. Yes. Right. So that's
I think your nickname was Blobbert after you left.
Yeah. Blobbert. Oh, good times.
Yeah, I was hoping you guys had gone with like Golden Boy or some of these other things. And so when Bryan admitted what I had become, I was like, oh, I see. This is how it is.
So like you two are very in different places, kind of. But really, you were both at that rock bottom that, like, I don't think that either of you could have taken anything else before just crumbling. And now, like 3 years later, we can see the fruits of being at that depth of horrible badness. It's continues to be an amazing thing for me to see.
I do remember those first few days. I didn't get to see Jordan's first few days, so I think I got there when Jordan was coming out of his shell. But I remember crying more during those first 3 days than I'd cried in probably my whole life. But I did feel super broken, and just walking through the doors of Desert Solace was like the first glimmer of hope that I had got in 26 years. I thought I had written off myself as just an addict, and I was always going to be an addict, and I was going to die an addict. And I thought, I just want to hide this as long as I can, because there's no way. I've tried a million times to get over my addiction, and I've never been able to do it. And so I just resigned myself to being an addict for the rest of my life. And so when I walked through those doors and recognizing that, hey, there are people here who have a way that, they claim will lead to recovery. And if they claim that they can show me a way to let go of my addiction, then I will listen to everything they tell me to do. If it meant like, sleeping upside down for 3 years, I would do it. Whatever they told me, I was willing to do it. I can relate to that, seeing people physically often, a lot of times you can see guys who come in and physically you can tell that these guys are just broken. But like you said, when you look at them with kind of your heart, you see that there is like a spiritual sickness there. And I tell guys all the time when they graduate, I wish I had like a soul camera where I could take a picture of their soul when they come in, and then take a picture of their soul when they leave, because you can see it in their eyes. Like there's just this brightness that shines out when they leave, and they're just so like, it's almost like this childlike innocence that they've let go of all this garbage that they've been holding on to that's been weighing them down, and they look light as air, like they'll just float out the front door and take on life in a different way. And I love it. That's why I came back to do what I do, is I love seeing that transformation happen in people.
Yeah, and I want to just the quick preface thing on this. Obviously, the three of us are having this conversation because we met each other in this environment, and we're very involved in this because those are the choices we made. Obviously, there are, people find recovery in different situations that may not involve in treatment, because that's a big choice to make. And I've conventions or in interactions with other people, I've run into hundreds of people that have found, massive and greatly, spiritual recovery without this being part of their lives. But I've also found people, or connected with people, and probably for myself especially, where in treatment was the thing that was necessary. So it's people just get to make their own choices on what level of care they need to get what they want in life. And so just wanted to state the obvious real quick for folks.
Yeah, obviously I agree with that. I think there are people first who come into recovery, in varying levels of addiction. There are some people who just don't need inpatient recovery to get what they need to get into recovery. And then there are other people who have dealt with the addiction for decades and are just so entrenched in it that getting out of their everyday life is all that will do it for them. But I will say, obviously I'm a big believer in inpatient treatment, and that's not just because I work here, mainly just based on my own experience. I just think that seeing people who go through 90 days of intensive treatment, and then when you see them out in the world and in their, 12-step groups or recovery networks, they're so far ahead of some people who just are stuck in doing what they're doing that I'm a big believer in inpatient treatment for people, especially when they've just dealt with the addiction for so long. But there are people, like you said, who are able to do it just with 12 steps. And there are some people who need outpatient recovery. And then there are some people who I think need inpatient. It just depends on their situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we mentioned already on the show that culture and environment are huge parts of recovery and how that recovery is going to turn out.
Yeah, I think ultimately it just comes down to whatever gets you that spiritual healing. Like some people need 90 days inpatient treatment center. Some people need 12 weeks of going to a meeting. Recovery is an intensely personal spiritual journey, I think, at least in my observation. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what it really, really boils down to, is just whatever gets you that spiritual connection to God or your whatever higher power, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I like it. I want to jump. I think we're gonna jump in and out of recovery type stuff for the rest of the show, but I quickly want to jump over just to kind of where you were locationally, Brandon. You said that you grew up in Salt Lake. You worked and spent a long time in Vegas, and now you find yourself in St. George. Do you have a favorite?
I don't. I will say I will probably never end up going farther north than St. George, just because.
Wow. I am insulted.
Yeah, the climate. I've become a desert rat. Really, my blood has thinned out quite a bit, and getting back into the cold just does not. It doesn't do anything for me. Mm-hmm. Even though I grew up snowboarding and skiing, it's the snow just doesn't appeal to me. I don't know. I love Januaries and Februaries just wearing like a light jacket or a t-shirt. And I don't think I'll ever go away from that. So I do love Vegas. There are a lot of things. People have an image of Vegas that is a very touristy image where they just see the strip and they think that's all that Vegas is. Vegas is just like any other large city, or any city, I guess, with 2 million people in it. There's a ton of suburbs that are wonderful to live in. What I loved about Vegas is that it's kind of the best of both worlds. You can live in the suburbs and stay away from the strip as much as you want. No, I never really went to the strip unless people came into town and wanted to go there. Like family members would come in and we'd take them to the Bellagio or whatever to see the fountains. But the great thing is there's world-class food, world-class entertainment, and you get to, also live just in the suburbs where you can raise a family in a normal way. So yeah, there are advantages to living in Las Vegas over living in St. George. I feel like after living here for 2.5 years, I've tapped out like every restaurant they have here. There's not a lot of eating options, not a lot of entertainment options. And
man, that took you a long time.
No, honestly, it was probably within a year that I did that. But,
yeah, that sounds more accurate.
Yeah. But, there are advantages to living in St. George as well. Like the beauty of, that was one reason why I made the choice to come here. When I was in Desert Solace, I remember I was shoveling horse crap and looking out at like the view in the distance and seeing the natural beauty that surrounds the city of St. George, and realizing like there is just like God created beauty here. And I love everything about it. I love getting out into nature. And so I told myself I will live here one day. I just didn't know that it was going to be within like 6 months of leaving Desert Solace. So yeah, St. George and Vegas, I love them both. I don't think I'd put one above the other. They both have their advantages and disadvantages.
I hated St. George when I showed up. I So when I tell people I'm from Washington State, and people get this image in their mind of Seattle or Bellevue or just lush green forests, and that at the time was my version of beauty as well for like nature. So I tell people I'm from Washington, and missionaries from our church, they say all the time, they're like, I saw that I was going to Washington and I thought I was going to like a Seattle type area, and they get off the plane in Pasco, Washington, and it's a desert, and they're freaked out. They don't know what's going on. So I'm a desert dweller as well, but my version of beauty was like, I would always want to go like, let's go to Seattle where it's like lush and not the desert. Like that's where it's beautiful. So I get off the plane in St. George, and it's like the Tri-Cities if the Tri-Cities didn't get water for 2 years. It was, and there were more mountains. And I thought it was the ugliest. Like, who looks at these rocks and enjoys it? I couldn't understand.
I do.
Thanks, Brandon.
I just got done telling you how beautiful I think it is, and then you're like, who looks at this crap and thinks this is pretty?
Yeah, you go enjoy the snowy winters of Idaho, buddy. We'll have fun on our motorcycles and t-shirts in St. George.
Oh gosh, not
man.
The fact that you can just ride a motorcycle pretty much all year does have some sadness when I think about my situation, and I'm about to. It's already snowed almost a foot in Idaho Falls.
Yes.
This year, about halfway through again for me as well. I can't remember. We went on hikes as a regular part of our recovery. Still, I'm never gonna let it go. Still at the dumbest time during the day. Let's just get that out there. 3 p.m. in St. George in the summertime is statistically stupid. Anyways, we were on one of those hikes, and I think it was at the top of the White Mountains. What are those called?
Nothing by that name here. We were probably most likely in Snow Canyon State Park.
Snow Canyon, yes. So we're at the top of Snow Canyon, or some of those areas. I was looking over it, and my perspective changed, and I could see the beauty that St. George had. Because when I got there, you guys were saying, like, we were in the car, and Bryan was like, you can pull off anywhere in the road, and you can hike anywhere. And I was like, yes, but why? Why would anybody do that? And by the time I left, it really was like, yes, like, I appreciate everything around me. There's a ton of beauty here, and yeah, it is a fantastic thing in St. George that really in most places you can get off pretty much anywhere on the side of the road, and if you hike for 20-25 minutes, you're gonna find yourself in a great spot. So I would agree with that for sure, Brandon. It would have been better if it was at like 6 a.m. though. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have wanted to get up at that time anyway.
We all got more. My morning routine was the healthiest it's ever been when I was there.
True.
It's still hot. In the summers here, at 6 a.m., it's still hot. It never gets below like 95 degrees in the pit of summer. 95
compared to like 113.
That's only like 10. That's like barely any difference. Once you get up above like 110, it's all the same anyway.
It's all the same anyways? Okay,
yeah.
Well.
At 110,
I find
then
fault
it's like,
in your logic.
Yeah, well, once it's hotter than 110, then you like take your sweater off, and then it's like, oh, it's kind of hot now.
That's disgusting. You disgust me. Okay, obviously Tri-Cities and Idaho Falls are both a bit more north than where you guys are at right now, but that is just revolting. We do get our winters a little bit colder here in Tri-Cities, and Idaho Falls gets it a wee bit colder than that. So
a wee bit.
Yeah, see, I just see the Tri-Cities, like, I've never been there, but I picture it in my mind after you tell me that it's desert, that it's just like St. George, but like dark and dreary all the time. Like everybody just walks around like moping around, shoulders down, and they're like looking at the ground like, oh, why do I live here?
Yeah, yes. Whenever I think of like the city, I just think it's always like late evening, like the sun's always down. There's never light there.
Like somebody is just filming it with like a blue filter.
Yes.
All right. I respect that. I'll send a photo to you guys, or maybe I'll just go and I'll hike Badger today that we live nearby, and I'll have Bryan post that on the Instagram. knowing my luck, I'm gonna forget and I'm gonna do it at sunset. So it's just gonna hit all the boxes anyways.
It's gonna prove our point.
It's gonna just prove the point. So because I won't want to get up in the morning. So it's also getting a little bit chilly. It's already that time, so doing it in the morning is kind of a commitment. Gotta dress appropriately for it. Brandon, what about hobbies? Stuff that doesn't both make you money and keep you sane. Well, maybe it keeps you sane, but things other than work and addiction recovery. What are things that you like to dabble in? Maybe if the family's away or when you have time. Are there any hobbies or sports or activities that you like?
So one part of my recovery has been going to the gym every day, which sounds boring and terrible, but it's actually become one of those things. Like my therapist, when I left, he said you need to find some things that will replace the dopamine that you got from your addiction, and so he was like giving me suggestions like going to 12-step groups or like going to the gym, and I'm like, man, those things all sound terrible. I don't want to do any of that.
Yeah.
But I started working out like pretty frequently, and honestly, like now if I don't make it to the gym in a day, or like so every so often I'll skip a day, but like if I miss a day, I can feel it. I just feel kind of down. So I love going to the gym. I've started reading again. I found that when I was an attorney, I stopped reading for enjoyment because reading was such a big part of my job that like when I got home from work, I did not want to pick up a book and read. It just sounded terrible to me. So now I read. My goal this year was to read 50 books, which works out to about a book a week. And I've read 40 books so far this year, so I have 10 books left to read before the end of the year. And I love reading. That's become a big part of my life. And other than that, I also love movies, which is has been a sad habit or a sad hobby to have during the past 2 years, with COVID shutting all that stuff down. But I love going to the movies. I'm really excited to see Dune. That's coming out this weekend. I read the book earlier this year, or at least I listened to it on Audible. I like to call Audible my friend that reads books to me. Because I don't have the time always to like sit down and read a book physically, but since my commute is about a half hour each way, I get some good time in the car to listen to books. And Dune was always one of those books that was like, it's huge, it's like 800 pages or something. So tackling it like in physical form was daunting to me, and I think I'd tried starting to read it a few times, and I just realized I'm like, this is not for me to like sit down and read. I need somebody else to read it to me. So I listened to it on Audible, and that made all the difference. So yeah, I'm excited to see Dune coming out, and we just went to see last weekend, and I enjoyed that one. It wasn't Daniel Craig's best Bond movie, but I think it was a good wrap up. It's definitely worth it to see it. So yeah, I like movies a lot.
Man, I used to like movies. I just haven't been like drawn to any movies recently. Dune, I am super pumped for Dune, and I really wanted to watch The Last Duel, but
that one looks decent, except for Matt Damon's mullet. I'm not sure how I feel
that's
about
rough, dude, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, like those are the only two movies that have come out.
They've been very sparse over the past year. Like I think I've been maybe 4 or 5 times over the past this year to the movie theater, and that makes me sad because it was definitely a big part of my life, before COVID, was going to the movies probably, I don't know, at least once, 2 or 3 times a month, I would say I would be in the movie theaters.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm aware that you have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the movies. Do you care to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So Jordan's aware that part of my recovery.
Yeah, I totally get a cheat right now, and I'm using inside information.
Insider baseball.
I found that since I've let go of my primary addiction, my addiction has moved into other areas, and I have a food addiction, and I struggle with that quite a bit. Even though making it to the gym and being as active as I am, I'm able to like keep the weight off, but I love sugar. I love like anything with sugar, fat, and salt in it. I will eat like crazy. And the movies are a huge trigger for my food addiction because I can't, like, we talked about environment is a huge part of addiction, and going to the movie theater is a big trigger for me because every time I've been to the movie theater, pretty much my whole life, I sit down and I drink a big, like 44-ounce cup of Coke and get a big bucket of popcorn. And then I also like to eat red vines and candy with it. So yeah, I struggle. Like, I have to stay away from the movie theater if I want to like eat healthy. And I went on keto for a while this year, which was great because I lost a ton of weight. But like anytime I would go to the movie theater, it would knock me right out of ketosis because I just eat a ton of carbs every time I'd go. So yeah, I do have a love-hate relationship with the movie theater itself. Movies I don't have a problem with. It's not their fault. It's the movie going to the movie theater that it's their fault. Those smug punks at the concession stand that are always like, "Oh, come buy some popcorn from me. You know you want it." I'm like, "You're the devil."
Yeah, you just walk in and you smell that stuff that's supposed to be butter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so
yeah,
great.
soda. Yeah, soda's a big thing for me watching movies. That's a big thing all the time for me, I'll be honest. But especially like walking into a movie theater and
Right.
like I'm gonna sit down in this chair, and what, you expect me not to have a soda to sip on? Like
Right.
that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, movie theaters and road trips are always like,
Yep.
though I can just accept the fact that like I'm not going to be able to do those without drinking soda and eating candy because
Yep.
road trips growing up, it was always like, all right, let's stop at the gas station, load up on some candy and some soda and hit the road.
Heck yeah, man.
I have my own vices, but luckily both of those things, I will say, so I grew up, popcorn wasn't really a huge thing. I loved nachos, so I would just pay the exorbitant amount of money at those places to go get nachos. My childhood was lived in like, we always had to go to the theater that let me put the amount of cheese that I wanted on the nachos. Because if they got to choose how much cheese to put on my nachos, then nobody was going to be happy at the end of the day. Snacks during that time was never a big habit of mine. And then road trips, I just discovered again because I just got back from a trip, are not like, I just have my water and I don't really have a whole lot else with me. I just plan on stopping like somewhere at some point to get food. So I find that fascinating. It's never been a habit of mine.
I find you fascinating, Jordan.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Don't ever put a bag of potato chips in front of me, though.
Okay, there we go.
So
there's the vice.
That's the. I will buy. My vice is I will go to the grocery store to buy ingredients for dinner, and one of those ingredients is always a bag of chips because I have to eat potato chips while I'm making the dinner.
That's healthy.
Yes.
Healthy choices.
So I'm not making any of these comments on a high horse here, so. Well, I love that. So reading, movies, those are both big things. Were there sports that were ever a part, like when you were a kid or growing up?
You said hockey. How into hockey were you?
Yeah, I was really into ice hockey. I started out, I grew up in the age where rollerblades were just coming onto the scene. And so then we discovered street hockey. We could play, hockey out on the street. That naturally led into, I went to a high school that had a really great ice hockey program. So I joined that. I joined the team and played ice hockey all through high school. I loved it. I loved ice hockey. I was always like athletic enough to get myself into trouble in sports, like where I could do okay. I was never like the star at any of the sports. So I played tennis, I played golf, I played basketball, but ice hockey was the only one that I really played like on a higher level. So yeah, I like sports in general. I haven't stuck with a lot of them now. Once I got into law school, a lot of my hobbies had to drop off. And so, I had a set of golf clubs that like sat in my storage unit for 10 years and collected dust. And I finally just got rid of those. And now I have like people inviting me to go out and play golf with them. And I'm like, dude, why did I get rid of my clubs? What am I doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, I enjoy watching sports as well. I like college football and basketball. So yeah, I still like sports, just it's not as big of a part of my life as it used to be when I was younger. I think a lot of people go through that.
Yeah, I'm going through that right now.
You're going through that right now, Brent?
Yeah, I used to love football, but like, I haven't even watched a single full football game. I've actually watched more hockey than I have football this year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well,
Who's your hockey team?
I watched. First of all, when I say my team is anything, just know that I know nothing about the team that I'm about to say. But so my hockey team is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh yeah.
But I did watch the Golden Knights play the Seattle Kraken. I watched the first period. They went up 2-0 in the first period, so I was like, okay, this isn't much of a game, and I turned it off. But it ended up being a pretty close game, I think I heard.
Yeah, see, being in Vegas for as long as I was, I kind of adopted. I mean, they started the Golden Knights like the last couple of years that I was there, and so I did get to go see them play in the Stanley Cup Finals, and that was a really cool experience.
Wow.
So the Golden Knights are kind of my team as far as ice hockey is concerned. But growing up, I did like the Penguins. I loved Mario Lemieux. He was like my ice hockey hero. Because he was like the anti-Gretzky kind of, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I couldn't be like a homer for Gretzky. I had to be like the cool guy who's like, oh yeah, Mario Lemieux, he's better.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So you're the pretentious, like, off,
right?
like the Rivals fan. I see.
Yeah, I had to prove a point to people that like I'm not I'm not that guy. I'm not the Gretzky guy.
You're not the bandwagoner.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a real fan. I get that.
Right. Yep.
I like it, and I can't remember what you've said to me, but I mean, were video games ever part of your life at any point?
Yeah, so my parents refused to buy any gaming consoles for us growing up, so I was always like the kid that was jealous of people. My next door neighbors, they always had the newest and greatest gaming console, and I never owned one until I turned, I think it was 16. And I was able to buy my own. So I bought a Nintendo 64 when I was 16. And I bought GoldenEye with it. And we played that nonstop for I don't know how long.
That's a good choice.
Like a whole year of my life was just consumed with GoldenEye. And that I feel like that was kind of the first big time multiplayer shoot each other kind of game.
It was foundational. Like, that's
really
the
was.
memory for so many people,
right? And then I think
they would just play that.
Shortly after that, like Microsoft came out with Halo, and I think that was kind of the next big thing after GoldenEye. People transitioned from GoldenEye to Halo, but other than that, I played a lot of Warcraft in high school. I
didn't know that.
Yeah, this was before World of Warcraft came out. I played Warcraft 2 with my friends.
The Warcraft. Okay.
Yeah, over a dial-up internet connection.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really dating myself. And then when I went on my mission, I got home and I kind of just let go of video games for the most part. I don't know. I had a different mentality, and I just felt like playing video games for a long time was just a waste of time for me. And so I let go of that. But I still can see the draw to that. My kids have a Nintendo Switch and they play Minecraft nonstop. And every so often they'll be like, hey, come play Minecraft with me. So I'll sit there and build like an office building or something in Minecraft. And it takes me like 2 hours to build this stupid office building. And then I get done and I'm super proud that I built it. And then I think like, why did I just spend 2 hours building something in a fake world? So I don't think video gaming is the kind of thing that I can let myself get back into with my addictive mentality. It would take too much time out of my life.
Well, I don't want to spark anything in you, but I will say that I'm pretty sure that the Warcraft that you played has been remastered since and has been released in a remastered format. So just throwing that out there for the world. So.
Okay, I might have to check that out. We'll see.
If I can't get a hold of you for a couple days, I will be concerned.
Yeah.
Bryan, remind me like your big thing. Okay, I don't want to get this wrong because we've had extensive conversations about this that people can backdate. Final Fantasy.
Yep.
And like Kingdom Hearts.
Yep. That's pretty much it. There's a third
Those two
one.
things?
Yeah, Ace Combat was a
Oh,
like
that's
a
right. Yeah.
arcadey like flight simulator. Lots of fighter jets. That was I was
Yeah.
super big into that.
Yeah. So I think for me, probably just because of the age difference. So I was coming into that right when Halo was coming out, and so Halo and Gears of War and Call of Duty, those three games were like the beginning for me, and that affected a lot. My parents did let me play video games, so I wasted a lot of time on it.
Yeah, you missed so much of like the early terrible graphics games that like King's Quest. My dad kind of we bought like an early PC in the early 90s, and he bought this maybe the late 80s, and he bought a game that goes on it, and the game had floppy disks. There were 5 different floppy disks that it came with. So you'd get to a certain point of the game and you'd have to eject the disk and then put a new one in to play the next part of the game.
That's amazing.
I look back on that game with so much fondness, and then like a few years ago, I think I tried to buy a remastered version of it and play it again, and I'm like, this game is so terrible. It was so bad. But that back at that, that time, it was so much fun. I love that game. But yeah, you'll have to look it up. King's Quest. That was like my favorite game in the early 90s, late 80s.
Yeah, I see. It looks like they remastered it back in 2016.
Yeah.
That seems interesting. I like the floppy disk style. That is amazing.
Right.
That's amazing.
You hopped over. You did law school, going all the way through. Can I ask, with the family, where did you and your wife meet, kind of on that road?
So I met my wife while I was in college at the University of Utah. I didn't meet her there, but some friends and I went down to... My wife is from St. George, so we traveled to St. George, which is kind of like it's like the hotspot for, spring break in Utah for Utah Mormons to head down to St. George and get a little crazy. So me and my friends went down to St. George it was a summer like golf trip actually. And we had a friend who was in school down here. She was going to SUU in Cedar, and she was dating a guy that was friends with my wife's group of friends. And so he kind of like connected us. So I met her in St. George, and then we started dating long distance for about a year, and then we got married. So this was 2003 to 2004. I got married in 2004. So she moved up, and I finished off my last year of school in Salt Lake, and then I got accepted to UNLV for law school. I got accepted to a couple other colleges, universities for law school, but as soon as she found out that like UNLV was an option for us, she's like, all right, that's where we're headed, because then we were closer to her family. So
yeah,
and I was okay with it because UNLV had a really good program for being such a young law school. They were ranked really highly at the time, so I figured it was a good opportunity for me, and I wasn't looking to go to like Duke like my sister did and go work for a huge law firm somewhere back east. I just wanted to work at a law firm, in Utah or Nevada or Arizona, maybe in this area. And my dad kind of convinced me that like, if you don't, these law firms recruit locally most of the time. So if you don't want to go work for a big law firm, just go to a local law school and you can get a great job here in Utah. So that's what I did. And then I got a good job working for a big law firm in Las Vegas. And we ended up staying there for a lot longer than we thought we would.
Were there any odd cases that came about? I'm obviously super ignorant on, that whole universe. Due to the location, were there any just things unique to you being in Vegas, as far as cases that you took that you're able to share publicly?
Yeah, I had a few like cases that I would call unique to Las Vegas. I mean, I don't know. I guess there's strippers everywhere, but I represented I represented a stripper in a custody case one time. That was interesting. I was the attorney on a case where a casino almost burned down. The Monte Carlo casino caught fire I think it was in 2008. And caused like $100 million worth of damage this fire did. And so I was defending the company. There was this welding company that was being accused of starting the fire. So I defended that lawsuit. And then my one claim to fame was that I sued Manny Pacquiao, who is a boxer. He was in a boxing match against Floyd Mayweather a few years ago. I don't know, I don't want to get into all the legalities of it, but I ended up suing Manny Pacquiao and not realizing what the amount of press that this would get. So like I filed the case, and the next morning I get into my office and my paralegal is looking at me with like wide eyes, like, what did you do? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I just got off the phone with ESPN and TMZ and like ABC News. They're all calling and they want to interview you about this case. And he's like, did you sue Manny Pacquiao? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And he's like, well, I don't know what to tell these people. So yeah, that was my one claim to fame. So I sued Manny Pacquiao.
Nice.
That's fun. Were you able to step into that, or was it kind of like a deer in the headlights situation?
So it was a class action lawsuit, and the hope was that we would be able to keep the jurisdiction in Las Vegas, and then they hold a hearing. These class action courts hold a hearing like around the country to determine like where the jurisdiction will be held. Attorneys around the country that were arguing like, oh, it should be in California or it should be in New York, and so the court ended up deciding that it was going to be in California. And at that point, I just decided it wasn't worth my time to continue to represent, these people in this case. So I handed them off to another attorney who was in California who could represent them. There are firms that were much bigger than me that handle class action lawsuits like for a living. Like that's all they do. And so I figured these people would be much better represented if I just handed them off to one of these law firms that do it full time. So yeah, I wasn't. Yeah. I probably could have handled it all the way through, but it didn't fit me at the time.
Well, and that's always appreciative to not try to just hold on to the money and recognize that they might be just taken care of better elsewhere by somebody else. That's always nice to hear in multiple different industries, that kind of mindset.
Yeah, I was often a terrible salesman as an attorney because most of the time people would come to see me and I would try and talk them out of filing a lawsuit. I'd tell them like, you are crazy if you want to file this, basically. Like, you are going to pay, the attorneys are going to make a lot of money off of you. And in the end of it, a lot of times people just get a piece of paper, they'll get a judgment against somebody. And all it is a piece of paper that tells them, hey, this person owes you, $50,000. Now you have to use that piece of paper and go try and collect money from these people. And a lot of times those people don't have $50,000 to pay you. So you have a worthless piece of paper that says you're owed $50,000. And so, a lot of times people would just leave my office like, well, I guess I'm not filing a lawsuit. And I don't know. I'm a big believer that, they'll probably be happier with me if I steer them the right way from the beginning rather than just taking their money and filing a lawsuit that they'll end up being unhappy about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would certainly be appreciative about it. Yeah. Because that's I know walking into one of those offices, I would walk in knowing absolutely nothing. And so I'd like to think that in some situations I might know my way around and know if I'm being kind of having the wool pulled over my eyes, but if I was ever in that situation, I would probably be none the wiser.
Yeah. And even sometimes when people are the wiser, they'll recognize that, or they may not recognize it, but I'll tell them like, if you want to litigate out of pride, I'm willing to do that for you. But as long as you understand that like, this is all about your ego, then that's fine. I had a guy tell me like, look, I will take this all the way to the end just because I hate this person and I don't care how much money it costs me. And I tell him, I said like, here are the downfalls of doing that. And he's like, I don't care. I'm still going to do it. So, I made a lot of money off of that case and he just litigated out of pride and got what he wanted out of it, I guess. But egos can be very costly for people, especially in the legal world.
Wow.
And we just, I loved the conversation that we had. And I was, that conversation that last recording on ego, I walked into that conversation very ignorant because, Bryan, you were able to edify me just on kind of where ego really came from. So definitely has an impact on our lives for sure.
Yeah. Were you ever surprised by any of those cases? Like the litigate out of pride cases?
Like, was I surprised at how they ended out, or how
Just like surprised
like,
that
far people would?
Yeah, like
would take
how
it?
far people would go out of spite just to try to hurt somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say surprised because I think it's something that I just became accustomed to by being in that world for 10 years. I was able to see people, you just recognize that like this guy's just litigating out of anger or, pride. His pride is hurt and he doesn't want to let go of it. He doesn't want to back down because of it. So it wasn't really a surprise to me, but I did see people take it way farther than I would have thought they would, or I thought they should. It just, it becomes so costly for people, but there are people out there that have so much money that they don't know what to do with it and they don't care. They're able to just satisfy their ego by throwing money at it.
What a world.
Yep. That's why I got out of it.
Yeah. I've got a question.
Yeah.
So years ago, I worked at a window company and I delivered windows around town, but our biggest account was actually a window distributor in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So I was down in Las Vegas every Friday for a while, and I just remember seeing, like, coming into North Vegas past that equipment auction place. What's the name? Ritchie Brothers Auction.
Right. Yeah.
So right just past that, it seemed like we just like entered a hallway of billboards for law firms, and they all had like the main person's face just like taking up a third of the whole billboard. Did you ever have a billboard like that with just your face and name up in Las Vegas? Okay.
No, I considered, actually there was a period where I was considering doing like parody billboards where I wanted to just make fun of the other attorneys who had those billboards. Like
that sounds so much like Brandon.
Oh, that's perfect.
There was an attorney who has a series, I think he still has a series of billboards up in Vegas, and it says in big letters, voted #1 attorney, and then there's like kind of an asterisk, and at the bottom it says like, buy this legal magazine that nobody's heard of.
Oh, nice.
And so I wanted to get a billboard that says like, my mom voted me the best attorney, and then just have a picture of my mom with like 2 thumbs up, and like,
oh, that's great.
And then I wanted to do another one where I was just like holding a mug and sitting in my chair, and the mug just says "World's Best Lawyer." And I don't remember. I had a ton of ideas of like the ways that I could parody the other attorneys who had like those tacky billboards up. But
yeah,
it's crazy in Vegas. I don't know. They have a corner on the billboard market there. The attorneys do, and traveling through Utah when I drive up to Salt Lake to visit my parents, and I see like the billboards for attorneys there of maybe like 5% of the total. I'm like, I could just move to Salt Lake and buy up all the billboards and just kill it as an attorney.
Yeah.
Corner the market there, because it's I don't know why they don't do it in Salt Lake, but they do in Vegas, but it's crazy.
I mean, we talked about ego a bunch, and like even back then, before that was when I was not very far in my education, but back even then, I would just see those billboards and be like, wow, that guy's ego is huge.
Right. Yeah, you kind of do have to have a big ego to be in that world.
Yeah.
Did you know we're going to be talking about marketing at some point in the future? And
nice.
I find billboards very interesting because the billboards are not something that, at least consciously, work on me. But you're on the other side of it. Were you aware of any numbers or any returns as far as those statistics on billboard versus call-ins for that?
Yeah, it's hard to say because a lot of it depends on where the billboard is, and like I have crazy stories about the billboards that they have when you leave the airport. There's, like the off ramps that come out of the airport, and there's just tons of billboards in that area, and they're all directed kind of toward the tourists. But I've heard stories that those are, anywhere from like $50,000 a month up to like $100,000 a month to pay for those. And I'm like, I can't imagine that they're getting any return off of that. But it's brands like Cartier or these luxury, Louis Vuitton that just have to spend a ton of money on those billboards, I guess, to get people to recognize their brand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, billboards are more directed toward like what's called top of mind advertising, where, you're not like searching for that brand, specifically like at the moment. But when something happens in your life, like, oh, my toilet's clogged, or I have like I have a flood or whatever in my house. And then you think like, oh, I know of this plumbing company because I've seen their billboards all around town. Like that's kind of more what they're directing it towards, It's just like so that when something happens in your life, you kind of remember this, this attorney or this plumber because you saw their billboard or heard their jingle or whatever it is at some point, That's not like nowadays, a lot of people just go to Google and they search for something, and that's why people pay a lot for pay-per-click ads on Google. But billboards are directed at like a completely different type of audience or a different scenario.
Yeah, well, and we were talking about that extensively in the last episode. I find the top of mind advertising just to be, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So I could see that being kind of the main thing that billboards serve as a purpose on that.
Right.
So we have we got to wrap up here shortly, but I wanted to, unless there was anything that you had, Brandon, on your end, I wanted to dip back into kind of addiction recovery, and just like you've had a ton of experiences, and like we said, like you stayed when I certainly left, and Bryan is in a different environment now as well, and you've stayed in this culture for quite a while now. Is there any messages or anything that you personally just try to express to people whenever you meet them about a recovery, as far as either people that don't know much about addiction recovery and maybe how important it is to that it be talked about openly, or people that are experiencing addiction? Just anything come to mind that you wanted to share with the audience?
Not specifically. I mean, I came into this interview just being open to whatever you guys wanted to talk about. But in my experience, I think I don't try and hit people over the head with me being in recovery or and I don't. Addiction isn't often the first thing that I talk about even though it is a huge part of my life. I find that like people who are struggling, they kind of find their way to me. If they're I'm open about it. I tell people my story when I feel like the time is right. And I think generally people know, who I am and what I've been through. And so it is kind of like that top of mind when people do go through a situation like this. Often, we'll have friends call us or people that we've met who are like, hey, I remember like Brandon, he's in that recovery world. He's been through his own journey. And so they'll often find their way to me, and I do my best to steer them into, what I think would help them the most. I think that like, some amount of therapy or having like a good therapist who specializes in the type of addiction that someone is dealing with is very helpful. I don't think that anybody really can stay in long-lasting recovery without getting involved in a recovery network. I'm a huge believer in the 12 steps and not just like going to the meetings, but also working the 12 steps and getting a sponsor, because I think accountability is crucial in recovery. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I can tell people about how to live like life in strong recovery, but I kind of, if they're not open to it, I find that it's kind of wasted on certain people if they're not interested, or I can tell that they're just, they still feel like they're like those people we talked about earlier, that like some people just think they know what to do and they think that through their own willpower they can handle it. It's like another challenge for them to overcome, and for me in my life, I found that I was never able to do that on my own, and I ended up having to get professional help. 90 days of inpatient treatment was what worked for me, but some people, they have their own methods and forms of recovery. So yeah, that's about all I got.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Bryan, do you have anything on your end as to kind of wrap things up?
I just want to say, like, this has been really fun for me, just kind of hanging out with you guys again. I don't keep in touch with many people from Desert Solace, but I'm really, really glad that I do keep in touch with you guys. I've said that a lot, and I know I've told both of you that you guys inspire me greatly. And this is another time that I'm just grateful that I know you guys and that I have you guys in my life. So thank you, Brandon, for joining us. Thanks for sharing part of your story and hanging out with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. We do need to, keep in contact in other forms. I don't always have to be like a guest on the podcast for you guys to communicate with me.
Every time.
Yeah, no, but I do want to say I'm glad that I had this opportunity. This has been fun. I am very impressed that you guys are able to do this. Like people listening to podcasts, I think, don't recognize often enough how difficult doing a podcast is. And I've talked to Jordan extensively about my struggles with, I've wanted to do a podcast for like 2 years now. And I have all this like fancy recording equipment that I bought. Like my addict was telling me like, oh, you got to go out and buy all that fancy equipment and, then you'll have a good podcast. And then I started recording and I realized, holy cow, this is way harder than it sounds. When you're just listening to somebody, you have no idea what goes into it, and it takes a lot of like dedication to get something like this done. So kudos to both of you for doing what you're doing. I appreciate it. One day I will release my podcast and I will let you guys know about it, but it's I have like several episodes in the can that are waiting to be edited, and I'll get to that one of these days.
Awesome.
Absolutely. We definitely said that for like a year before we posted our first episode.
Oh yeah,
so,
yeah.
I'll get ahead of the game before Bryan says anything, and I'll say I can relate to you in feeling like I need to buy all the equipment as I sit here in front of my 3-monitor command center that definitely isn't necessary for anything that I do. I appreciate you having kind of joining us, and yeah, as soon as kind of the discussions that you've had with me about what you've recorded, it fully lines up with a lot of the things that Bryan and I agree with. Mm-hmm. And I look forward to kind of sharing that as soon as you post it with our own audience and having them go listen to that. Because I think people will definitely find value in it.
Well, now that you said that, I'm going to record like a racist episode, and then you'll be like, oh man, why did I endorse that?
Like quickly go into emergency disassociation mode.
Like, I apologize for endorsing Brandon's podcast. I did not know he was a huge racist. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm not a racist. Don't quote me.
Hey, I have editing powers here.
Yeah, if I ever run for president, this is going to be problematic.
Yeah. If we have to deal with disassociations, I'm just gonna Bryan, you're gonna get that text from me like, hey, I don't want to deal with this. Can you make that Instagram post?
Done.
But
he's dead to us.
I don't think that'll be an issue, but yeah, thank you again, Brandon.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
We will see you guys for everybody else, including Brandon. We're going to be talking about lots of Dungeons and Dragons in the next episode.
Oh boy, am I excited.
Oh boy. Yeah, we are going to be catching up on all the Critical Role things that we have not been talking about over the last however many months. And so look forward to that. Brandon, I expect you to catch up on all 500 hours of Critical Role in the next 2 weeks. So good luck on that.
I'll see what I can do.
All right, sounds good.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Until then, remember, don't believe anything we say.